Today we're making a shrimp pasta with a cream-based sauce. And to do that we're going to make some fresh pasta. However, I understand that everyone doesn't want to put the time in to make their own pasta. So if you want to switch to pre-made or dried pasta, calorie-wise you can just substitute the flour and the eggs to 110 grams of dried pasta. When I make pasta, I like to use 90 grams of flour to 1 egg. And this is because I find that with this ratio you usually don't have to use any extra flour or water to get your dough to the right consistency. And for this dough I'm using 00 flour with the classic method of creating a well, in which we're going to crack the eggs into. And then I like to use a fork to collect the flour from the bottom of the well. And after a little while you can add more flour, and when you end up with a very gooey mess that won't run over your entire counter, you can use a bench scraper to incorporate more of that flour into the eggs. And when the dough is less likely to stick to your hands, it's time to knead the dough. And what this does is that it works the glue and gives that pasta that nice chewiness that we're looking for. And we want to keep on kneading until we have incorporated all of the remaining flour into the dough. And if the dough is too wet, you can add a little bit more flour, or if it's too dry you can add some water. Just do that in small steps. I usually just rinse my hand under some water and then incorporate that water into the dough, and that's usually all that it needs. And after we've kneaded the dough for a while, you can check that if it's done by just poking your thumb into it, and if it springs back, it's good to go. Final step, just to wrap the dough in some plastic wrap and leave it to rest on the counter for at least 30 minutes. And then it's time to move on to our shrimps. And we're going to use 700 grams of unpeeled shrimps, which we are going to clean, meaning we want to remove the shells and everything from the shrimp part we actually want to eat. Place the shells in a separate bowl and the shrimp in another bowl. And when we've done with this very tedious step, we're going to place the shrimp shells in the pot and put it on the stove on medium heat and let the shrimp shells sear for a little while we get started on our vegetable part of the shrimp stock. And for that we're going to need 2 carrots, 1 leek and 1 onion. And here there's no need for anything fancy, we just want to chop them roughly and put them in a pot. Only important thing here is to clean the leek properly, because they usually contain a lot of dirt, so just cut it in half and then rinse it properly. And you might have noticed that I am not using any oil for searing the shrimps, and I won't be using any oil or butter or anything to sear the vegetables either. Could you? Absolutely. Would it taste better? Probably. However, it's a very simple way to reduce the amount of calories, and since we're using cream and other stuff later on, I think it's actually very fine without any of those. One thing we want to add, however, is some wine to our shrimp shells. So we want to use 2 deciliters of white wine, which we're going to let reduce for a little while we sear our vegetables. And while the wine is reducing, we're going to add 35 grams of tomato puree for the flavor, and also to add a little bit of a nice color to the dish. And we want to sear that tomato puree for 1 or 2 minutes to avoid any of that bitter flavor. And when that is done, we're going to mix all of these things together. So simply pour over the shrimp shells and wine to the second pot, cover it with water, and then finally we are going to add 1 teaspoon of fennel seeds, 3 bay leaves, some salt and some pepper. And that's it, that's our stock. We are going to let that boil for roughly 1 hour. Stir occasionally, there's no need for a lot of attention here, it sort of handles itself. So all we need to do now is stir it occasionally and after 1 hour we are going to use a chinois to drain this into a frying pan. And I want to use a frying pan here because we want to put this on medium heat and reduce the liquid a bit. And since the frying pan has more surface area, this means that the liquid will reduce faster. Our pasta dough is now ready, and we are ready to put this through our pasta machine. If your dough is very sticky here, you can sprinkle it with some flour, because later on we're going to place this on the counter. And if the dough sticks to the counter, you're just going to pull it apart and make a mess when you try to remove it. So we're going to start at setting 1, and I like to work myself up to the 6th setting when I do this. I think that's a good thickness for me. When you get around halfway there, it becomes much easier if you divide the dough into several parts. Here I'm using 270 grams of flour, as you might have noticed, because I'm making this for 3 people, or 2 adults and 2 children. And I thought it was reasonable to divide this into 4 pieces. I did not do that, meaning that I ended up with a very long piece of dough that becomes quite difficult to handle. However, you just divide it into the length of the tagliatelle you want. And here it's reasonable to sprinkle some flour on it, just dust it, so that the tagliatelle won't stick together later on. Then we need to place some water on the stove and bring it to boil. Our shrimp stock is boiling away, looking fine. So last step here is to actually put the pasta dough through the pasta machine. And then our pasta is done. Meaning that we can focus our attention on the shrimp stock again. First, salt the water as always, and when the water is boiling or almost boiling, you can just place your pasta in. As I said, I should have used a bigger pot. Since we sprinkled it with flour, it will absolutely boil over, so I thought I could pay attention to this and stock at the same time. I could not. But anyway, we want to add 2 deciliters of low-fat cream into our sauce. The cream I used is 13% fat, and this means that the sauce is going to appear to be quite loose and runny, but we're going to fix that later on. So first of all, we need to bring that cream shrimp stock mixture to a boil. And when the pasta is done cooking, we add simply, or almost done cooking, we simply add that to the frying pan and stir it in for a bit. Then we add a little bit of pasta water. Be careful because this can be quite salty, so you don't want to overdo it. And finally, we want to add half the juice from half a lemon. And as you can see, our sauce is still very loose and runny. So to fix that, we're going to add a cornstarch slurry. And I found that 10 grams of cornstarch together with a little bit of water got the sauce to the thickness I thought was good enough. And that's it. Just stir that in, bring to boil, and when the sauce is boiling and warm again, it will thicken up quite nicely. That's it. After all that work, we are done. Divide into 3 portions and salt the shrimps, because if you don't, they won't taste as nice as they could. So just put a little bit of salt on the shrimp and divide the sauce into equal parts for all the plates. And then finally, all we need to do is place the shrimps on top, and we are done. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy.